Today we're going to be studying Daniel chapter 7, but before we get started, I just want to inform the people listening here that the last few chapters of Daniel are prophetic. I believe all the chapters are looking toward the end time and trying to explain different things about the Antichrist, about what kingdoms will be on the earth during the last times when right before Jesus comes back. And that's what I have determined through the studies that I have gone through and what I've done on my own, putting scriptures together, but also listening to some other people. And everybody is to be a workman who rightly divides the word of truth and studies and decides what they want to believe, because there's a lot of interpretations out there about the book of Daniel. So this is my understanding of what I've determined after studying it myself. I'm not saying that I'm right about everything. There's a lot of mystery still that we're not told the exact meaning of stuff. But one thing that I don't want to be guilty of is that once an angel gives the interpretation of some of these visions, that means it's not symbolic anymore. He's told what that means, what that symbol means. And once a symbol is given an interpretation, I can't come along and change the meaning of it. Some things the angel doesn't reveal all the details to us. And I don't think it's the right time for us to understand. There's some things in the book of Revelation that's the same way, that we're not told the exact meaning of things. Like we're not told who these beasts represent, which countries. So everything's a guessing game. And we really won't know until it gets closer to the time. And I believe that it's because God doesn't want us to know yet. But especially when the two witnesses come in Revelation chapter 11, it says there's two prophets that the Lord has sent that will be prophesying for 3.5 years, doing miracles and bringing judgments on the earth for 3.5 years before they're destroyed by the beast, and their body lies in the city of Jerusalem for 3.5 days before the resurrection happens. So I believe they are the men that are going to help us to understand the things that God didn't want us to know right now. So while I may try to take some guesses, really your guess is as good as mine, because we're not told the exact meaning of some of these countries, like who they are. There's little clues there, and I will share with you some of the things that I've heard about what some people have thought about some of these clues. So let's begin in Daniel chapter 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind as he was lying in bed. Now we're going backwards in time. Belshazzar was the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. So this is his first year of his rule. Now, he was ruling for 17 years before that handwriting on the wall had happened, where he got taken over by the Medo-Persians. But at this point, he has just come into his kingdom, and he's the one that's on the earth at this time, who is reigning and ruling over the kingdom in Babylon. So he wrote down the substance of his dream. Verse 2. Daniel said, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me were 4 winds of heaven churning up the great sea. 4 great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea." The sea many times represents out of the world. So these are world leaders that are going to rise up on the earth at the end. Verse 4. The first was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground, so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it. Okay, so let's look at this first beast. It's referred to as like a lion, and if we look at all the different countries and what animal represents or what symbol represents the country, if people were to type in what country has got an animal as a lion that represents their country, we would come up with the British Empire, over in England and some of that area. So let's think about that, because when we went to war back in the time when our country was getting established, when we had that war and we wanted to withdraw from the British rule, what did we end up choosing as our country's representation? Well, look at what it says. When the lion had its wings of an eagle, it was first like a lion, and then it had the wings of an eagle that were plucked off. So that a lot of times the eagle represents America. So could this be representing the kingdoms of the British Empire and then America becoming a world leader as well? And look, it says that once it was plucked off, they were lifted up from the ground so that there was like a human being that stood on its 2 feet. So that reminds me of Uncle Sam. Could this be describing our country still? Again, this is all speculation, but this is towards the very end before Jesus comes back. We know that America right now is a world power, but we're going to see the same animals are being talked about and in Revelation chapter 13. And when it talks about the beast and goes through all the animals, about the lion, the bear, and also the leopard, where an eagle is not mentioned at all. And I am not sure why that is. Could it be that America has gone down as a nation? We're not a world power anymore? Have we been destroyed? I don't know. Some people will say, well, Revelation chapter 12 talks about that when Israel is having to flee, she's going to go on the wings of an eagle out to the desert. And they say that's America helping her. But many times in the Old Testament, the wings of the eagle represented God taking care of his people, Israel. So I don't feel comfortable with that interpretation. I'm not sure why we're not mentioned again, but that's personally, I don't believe we're mentioned in the book of Revelation at all, America. Okay, verse 5. And there before me was a second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. I was told, get up and eat your fill of flesh. Okay, so this second beast is called a bear. It's the representation of this second beast is the kingdom of the bear. So if we were to type in what nation has the bear as its representative, I think we pretty much all know this: Russia. Russia is known as having a mascot of the animal that represents it is a bear. So this could be talking about Russia as one of the kingdoms at the end. Verse 6. After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard, and on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. Now, who is the leopard? When I typed that in, I got Somalia as one of the people, but I've heard one ministry where I've told before that I went to Israel back in 2011 and went with a man who had started this ministry. It was called Politics and Religion at one point, then it changed. Right now it's called End Times Ministry, End Time Ministries. I think it's without the S, I'm not positive, but it used to be called End of the Age as well. Now they've got another name. This man that I went to Israel with died from the COVID back, I think it was in 2016, maybe. No, because it wasn't until 2019. I think 2020 he passed away. But he was the one that came up with this interpretation for the leopard. And I'm not sure that I agree, but he thinks that the leopard stands for Germany because of the Third Reich. It talked about 4 wings, and he thinks there's going to be a 4th Reich, that Germany's going to rise to power, and that's where the 4 wings, he's looking at that as being the 4th Reich. Now, whether or not that's going to happen again, anybody's guess is just as good as somebody else's. Okay, verse 7. After that in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. If we remember in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream about the different kingdoms that would be on the earth at the end. He talks about a 4th kingdom that has 10 toes. And here we see now this 4th kingdom that he's talking about here, that Daniel's getting a vision of himself, not Nebuchadnezzar's vision, but this is Daniel's vision. It had 10 horns. We're going to learn the interpretation of these 10 horns when the angel comes and talks to him about it. And he says they're going to represent 10 kings. Well, that was the same thing that I believe that Nebuchadnezzar's 10 toes represented as well as the last 10 kings that were in this kingdom, this fourth kingdom with the beast. But again, time will make it more clear. Verse 8. While I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them. This represents the Antichrist. And 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. So the Antichrist is going to rise to power and subdue 3 of the kings. And I had mentioned that back when we went through Daniel chapter 2. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a human being and a mouth that spoke boastfully. Well, we know the Antichrist is going to be prideful. He's going to be blaspheming God. So this so far is matching with what this little horn matches with what the Antichrist is going to be like. Well, let's keep reading, and I think it's going to still fit when we find out what's going to happen when Jesus comes. It's going to tell us in the next 2 verses. As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. That represents Jesus. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming like fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him, meaning angels. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. That could be the resurrected saints. The court was seated, and the books were opened. What do the books represent? Well, we can go to Revelation chapter 20. There's 2 types of books there. There's the book of life that has the names of the people that have been added to the kingdom, God's kingdom. But there's also books that describe the different deeds that people did while they were on the earth. It recorded the things that we were doing with our lives, the kind of actions that we had. And it's going to go through those things and see whether we have good or bad. That is what we were doing with our life. Verse 11. Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. Now, if we go to Revelation chapter 19, that's exactly what's happening to the beast. When Jesus comes back, he's going to destroy the Antichrist, the false prophet, these 10 kings, and all the beast's kingdom. Verse 12. The other beasts, meaning that lion, the bear, the leopard, they had been stripped of their authority, but were allowed to live for a period of time. I believe that they live into the millennium as long as they had not taken the mark of the beast. It's not, I know some translations say the people of those empires got to live into it. Not so much if they were part of the people that were coming against Jesus and taking the mark of the beast, but maybe those first 3 kingdoms, the lion, the bear, the leopard, aren't going to take the mark of the beast, and even the kings will survive. I'm not sure. Again, it's not real clear in these visions, but we'll have to just see how this unfolds as the time comes near. Verse 13. In my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. Now, who is that describing? Who's supposed to come back on the clouds? We were told in Acts chapter 1 that when they saw him go up, I think it was verse 9, that he was going up in the clouds, and it said that he'll come back the same way. So we know that this is Jesus. He's going to come back on the clouds, and his feet are going to touch on the Mount of Olives. That's in Zechariah 14, Acts chapter 1, and verse if you keep looking after he goes up in the clouds, it says that the apostles returned back to Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. So we know that when they saw Jesus rising up and going up to heaven, that not only was he in a cloud, but he was going up from the Mount of Olives. And so if he returns the same way, like the angels told that he would, that makes sense that he's coming on a cloud. His feet are going to touch the Mount of Olives, as Zechariah said that he would. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. Who's the Ancient of Days here? The Father. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Jesus' kingdom has begun already because the church, when we're added to the church, our names are written in the book of life. We're seated in the heavenly realms with Jesus. It says that in Ephesians chapter 1 and 2. We have every spiritual gift that's in Christ because we are in him and he's in us, that Holy Spirit that he has given us. So in a sense, we are already part of that kingdom, but we won't see really the physical kingdom and the reality of that kingdom until we come back after we're resurrected from the dead. Now, verse 15. I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the visions that passed through my mind disturbed me. I approached one of those standing there and asked him the meaning of all this. So he sees an angel and he's asking the angel to give him the meaning. So he told me and gave me the interpretation of these things. The four great beasts are four kings that have a kingdom that will rise from the earth. But the holy people of the Most High, talking about the saints, will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. Then I wanted to know the meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from all the others and most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws, the beast that crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. So the Antichrist will be trampling and killing a lot of people, including Christians. We can see that in Revelation chapter 13. We're going to also see it in the book of Daniel. So he is given authority by God to be able to test us and to even kill us. And he tells us to be faithful unto death, that if we will remain faithful unto death, we will get the crown of life. And the same thing happened during the first century. If you read Revelation chapter 2, verse 10, the church there at Smyrna, there were people that were going to be turned over to an empire king that was going to put them in jail. And he said, be faithful even unto death. You'll be put in prison for 10 days and be faithful unto death, and you'll get that crown of life. Well, the same thing is happening at the end times as well. The church is being slaughtered, a lot of the Christians. But many times what happened in the first century, when Christians were martyred, the blood of the saints would actually produce a whole lot more Christians, that people would see the bravery of the people. They would realize that who would die for a false gospel? So they started believing the true gospel. They started believing in it, and more people were coming in. It was multiplying quickly, and I'm hoping that that will be the case at the end. I don't know that it will be, because Jesus said in Luke 18, I think it was verse 8, that when he returned to the earth, would he even find faith on the earth? I don't know whether there'll be a revival, but God knows how everything's going to go at the end. Okay, verse 20. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell. Remember, the other horn was the 11th, that little horn that started out, that represents the Antichrist. The horn that looked more imposing than the others, and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the holy people and defeating them. There it is. He's been given authority to defeat even the saints, the holy people, and defeating them. Until, verse 22, until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people of the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom. So the Ancient of Days can refer to either God the Father or God the Son. Who's going to come back at that point? At the end times, it's going to be Jesus. So I believe that he's referring to Jesus coming back, and he's going to be the one that's going to be sitting on the throne when he comes back. In Matthew 25, it says, when the Son of Man comes and sits on his glorious throne, he's going to be gathering the nations, and he's going to be judging them. Okay, but who's going to possess the kingdom? It says the holy people, the Most High, they're going to be the ones who possess the kingdom in verse 22. Verse 23, he gave me this explanation. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth. So the Antichrist will be trying to take over every kingdom on the earth. He's not okay with just taking over the Middle East or wherever he's going to come from. He wants control of the entire earth. It says he will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. So there we go. These 10 kings come from the fourth kingdom. We get this explanation also in Revelation chapter 17 about who the 10 kings are. Well, I mean that the beast is coming with a coalition of 10 kings because he's got 7 heads and 10 horns. I think that's the picture of that beast. So anyhow, the 10 horns represent 10 kings, and you can look at that interpretation in Revelation chapter 17. I'm not there right now, so I'm trying to remember everything, but that's, again, we can look at that some other time. I have a video online also that explains all these things in Revelation. So you can look at those videos. That would be chapter 17 that you'd want to listen to. Okay, so verse 24 again. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom, the fourth kingdom. After them, another king will arise, the Antichrist, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. Again, these are the 3 kings. It's a divided kingdom. They're not all in agreement. They don't necessarily want this guy to be taken over. He's coming to reign and rule over them after they've already been reigning and ruling over the fourth kingdom. Some of them aren't really happy about giving their power to this beast, but they're going to be forced to do it. They're going to be told you submit or you die. And so they're going to submit, but they're not very happy about it. Verse 25, he will speak against the Most High, meaning the Antichrist, and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and laws. Now that's an interesting statement. He tries to change the set times and laws. Right now, we can see in America that there's a lot of Islamic people coming over here, and they're trying to change our laws, and also they go by a different calendar. And so that's another reason why I believe this beast is from the Middle East, and it could be a guy from Turkey again or Syria based on what we're going to learn in chapter 11. And again, time will tell, but that's what I'm leaning toward right now. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half a time. That means for 1 year, another year, 2 years, that's times 2, and then a half a time. So when you add that up, that's 3.5 years. That represents a time period of 3.5 years. And we learned that the Great Tribulation goes for 3.5 years. Because in the middle of the covenant, where we're going to learn it in Daniel chapter 9, the Antichrist is going to confirm a covenant with many for 7 years, and in the middle of it is when he starts trying to go around killing people and taking over the world. So that would, if the middle of 7 years, how much is that? 3.5 years. So that last 3.5 years, I believe Satan possesses him, and he becomes even more wicked than he was before he started taking over. But notice how it did say that he tries to change the set times and laws, meaning it doesn't seem like he's going to have success in being able to do that. Verse 26, but the court will sit, and that's going to be Jesus. He's the judge, and we're going to reign and rule and judge with him. So maybe a certain amount of this will be done by us too. Time will tell. But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven, not in the heavens, under heaven, will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will worship and obey him. This is when Jesus sets up his earthly reign for 1,000 years. And once the 1,000 years is over, the kingdom transfers from this earth into heaven, where it's eternal in the new Jerusalem. But until then, it says that all the kingdoms under heaven will be given over to him and the saints. So this is where it's a perfect picture. It goes in perfect harmony with what we're seeing in Revelation chapter 20, where it says that the dead are raised, the ones that have been beheaded, that didn't take the mark of the beast. And it's not only them, it's just focusing on that time period, because I believe it's trying to prove, again, that there's no pre-trib rapture. If the saints were there, and got their heads cut off during the last 3.5 years. That means there's not a pre-trib rapture 7 years prior. So he's telling us that all those people that have been resurrected, that we will get to rule with him and reign with him, just like it talks about in Revelation 20. And all the nations will obey him. If the people who had not been ready for Jesus' return, like the Jews, they had not got their glorified body, some of the Gentiles will be allowed to live into the millennium, as we see about the rest of this interpretation about the three kingdoms, that the lion, the bear, and the leopard. It says that some of them will be allowed to live for a certain period of time into the millennium. As long as people are obeying God, they will be fine. But if they start rebelling, that's what we're there for and what Jesus is there for. He's not going to put up with rebellion. There may be times that we have to issue an order of death over these people that are sinning on the earth. While Satan is bound during that 1,000 years, just because he's not tempting people doesn't mean that we're still not going to sin. We sin every day without him coming and tempting us by our own evil desires. So there's going to still need to be people judging over the earth and trying to keep the peace, because the people that are not in their new glorified body can still sin. And we're going to have to make sure that things stay calm on the earth and peace reigns on the earth. Because Jesus says that when he comes back and sets up his earthly kingdom, there's never going to be war allowed again. Verse 28. This is the end of the matter. I, Daniel, was deeply troubled by my thoughts, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter to myself. So this really was upsetting to him. He got some of the interpretation, and it was scary to him. I mean, I can only imagine that he's seeing his people being slaughtered and some of the Christians being slaughtered. That's not a good vision to have. And to see this guy just so evil doing all this terrible stuff to people that are God's own chosen people. So I can only imagine how terrifying this could have been. He was deeply troubled. His face turned pale. It sounded like he was about to pass out. It was not a good vision that he wanted to have, but God allowed him to have that to share with us because he wants us to be prepared. So we've got to try to learn what these visions mean so that we understand what's going to happen at the end, and we won't be able to be deceived because we already understand. We're prepared for whatever's coming. And I think that's part of, too, when you know you're going to go through persecution, you need to be growing your faith so that you'll be strong enough to sustain that when that time comes. So I think it's really important that we get in our word every day, that we're growing in our faith, and that we pray and we're asking the Spirit to give us strength to get through these hard times. What we're experiencing on the earth right now is hard, but it's not going to be anything like the Great Tribulation time. So we've got to be so connected to God in order to pass our test.